want to talk about was a post I put out on Twitter. And this is what I said. I said the cryptos that slowly bleed out are the most dangerous. This is because emotionally, it's not that bad to lose 1 to 5% of value in crypto as people in the market are used to it with Bitcoin. However, year over year, the Bitcoin charts look much different than alts. The charts below represent a majority of alts this cycle. The thing that makes, and the two coins that are here in comparison to Bitcoin, which we can go over, I'm not saying anything is necessarily worse or better than another one. We could probably pull up any alt cryptocurrency at this point and have similar charts, which is like the year on just kind of bleeding out. You know, Bitcoin, we had our traditional initial pump for the cycle. And by now, once you have that Bitcoin pullback, you expect to see previous all-times hit now, but these also are unique because these particular cryptocurrencies haven't been around for multiple cycles, right? So we're seeing something different here recently. And I just kind of, it got me thinking a lot about essentially what's been going on in the entire industry. And I thought these two were interesting because the tokenomics between Radiant and Lithium are quite a bit different. And then if you take into consideration something like kaspa, they're way different, right? I did say it doesn't matter because they are effectively identical in price. And by price, I mean their price trend, right? The tokenomics of any alternative cryptocurrency right now, regardless of what the tokenomics are, tend to have similar, if not identical, price action, right? So, you know, Lithium's down 80% over the year, or 88% over the year, and Radiant's down 90% over the year. Now, obviously, their actual price is completely different because their price is directly related to the total amount of cryptocurrency. So you could say, you know, obviously, Lithium being at 33 cents and Radiant being at 0.2 cents, but the actual like value and where it's headed is the same, right? So if you're trying to like figure that out, that's just, you know, obviously the more of something there is, the less it's going to be worth just because there's more. It's a frankly just supply and demand. Now I did say ASICs, but I do want to bring up that it's not just ASIC cryptocurrencies, right? So if we look at, say, something like, let's pull up Ravencoin, for example. What you'll see over the past year, frankly, not as bad. It's down 55% over the year, but you know, GPU mineable coins are not necessarily immune to this either, to be completely clear. I think there is a higher impact on, say, ASIC cryptocurrencies over the year. But that can also, kaspa is looking a lot better right now, but kaspa is at 46%, closer to Ravencoin. And maybe that has to do with the specifically going to be, like I said, the tokenomics potentially, but we're still down, right, compared to Bitcoin. If you add any of these to like a Bitcoin comparison chart, right, we're going down in general over the year, where Bitcoin is technically up over the year. And I think what's happened is that we have to be honest for proof of work, right? So this is kind of what I've been struggling with, and maybe you guys can help me out with this. With proof of work, we say, okay, well, proof of work is inherently better because we don't have these incentive structures that are, you know, creating essentially what are effectively the possibility of scams. But what we're seeing with proof of work cryptocurrency now, it's not necessarily, I don't want to call it a straight up scam, right? But what I want to point out is that we have an industry that is incentivized to currently sell equipment. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's an influencer model now. So if you look at anything that gets adopted by influencers over time, And this started out in cryptocurrency without proof of work, all the way back in the 2016 cycle with things like BitConnect, etc. Is you have people that are influencers that are directly incentivized to sell you a product, right? And what that creates is a demand to sell the product over a demand for the cryptocurrency itself. And that is affecting essentially the proof of work space, because what we've turned into now is essentially a bunch of tech YouTuber channels that are selling, mining equipment, and they're incentivized directly by the sales of the equipment. And I'm just as guilty of that in the past as anybody else. But I think that it's having a negative impact as a whole on the cryptocurrency industry. And I'm not so sure that we're headed in a proper direction, right? So things that get left behind are like fundamentals and the original reason for cryptocurrency to be in existence, right? So if we look at like Bitcoin and its inception and what it's supposed to be, which is a peer-to-peer cashless system that, gets rid of the middlemen, we essentially now have an entire industry built off of middlemen with mining manufacturers, like mining equipment manufacturers. And so we've created this industry that is purely built off of just the supply and the demand of not only the cryptocurrency itself, but much more the hardware that's involved. And I'm struggling with it, and that's why I want to talk about it, because I don't think that it's really, I think at this point where we are hitting in the industry is we're hitting the gold rush portion of selling the shovels to mine the gold on the West Coast, and not actually the gold being there anymore. Like, we're not seeing the fruit of the labor of the cryptocurrency mining portion of it in general. So what I said is this scenario directly mimics the California gold rush. The industry has become a bunch of influencers that made money off of mining early on, selling you the dream of making it rich like they did. The hard part is that they are just as much victims as the viewers, which I did go on to clarify a little bit, but I said it's hard for me to sit back and look at this objectively, obviously, because I am an influencer. And I do think, though, that the industry is sick. And I think that I don't know how to necessarily fix it, because just like with everything in life, like everything's an incentive structure. And so you have to rebuild the incentive structure to fix the problem. And Bitcoin intentionally was set out to set up an incentive structure or incentive model that dissuaded people from being able to, obviously print more money than they actually have, creating value through scarcity, these sorts of things. But now it's very clear that that can be manipulated in the wrong direction. And I wanted to talk to the community about it, because I'm not sure how this gets resolved, right? So how do I put this? I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with developing miners to mine cryptocurrency, right? I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with, promoting miners to sell cryptocurrency. What I think is incorrect, though, is pretending like, everybody's going to get rich off of doing it when that is clearly no longer the case, right? And I think we need to be completely honest about where we're at in the industry, which has been, now we've had 3 proof of work cryptocurrencies release over the bear market, where the entire intention of those cryptocurrencies appears to have been, or at least maybe not from the developers themselves, but at least turned into shovel selling cryptocurrencies, with Kaspa, Radiant, and Alephium being the most notable, right? And I don't think I'm coming out to basically say at this point, I don't think it's a good idea to be purchasing these ASIC miners. I think in general that if you are looking at getting into mining right now, there's a higher likelihood that the ASIC miner that you purchase will be a net negative for you and not a net positive, right? I don't think that it's going to be something where everything moons at this point. And now we've talked, this is all backed up by the content that I've been creating here recently, surrounding, for example, the sheer number of tokens and availability of them on alternative networks, meaning that we have a flooded market, right? Which means that there's only so much liquidity that can go around. So the likelihood at this point, it's become gambling. Frankly, at this point, mining cryptocurrency and purchasing ASIC miners has become straight up gambling. There used to be a time when you could, basically provide a service, provide that security to a network, be compensated. People would continue to work on those projects, and then essentially over time they would have some sort of value. But now there's just as high of a likelihood of a project being abandoned as there is a likelihood of that being continued, right? So, and actually being worth any money at the end of the day. And so when I sit back and I look at this completely objectively, and I want to my goal has always been to essentially help other people be able to have some sort of financial independence. And in a lot of cases, I have been blinded, had my blinders on when I look at the industry, because I think, there's no issues with proof of work, because proof of work, you're providing a service to the network and you're getting compensated for that. But frankly, because of the way that they're getting churned and burned and the amount of networks being released, it's becoming extremely difficult to navigate the space, and it is becoming a lot closer to gambling than it is to actually providing a service and getting payment back, if that makes sense. So we're all playing essentially, the slot machine, as Ark says, and I'm not comfortable pretending like that's not what's happening. Okay. There are things that can make you more or less successful, right? And the fact of the matter is that the things that make you more or less successful is your position in the industry. Okay. So if you are an ASIC manufacturer, you have a significant advantage. If you are an influencer that is selling the equipment and obviously they want to work with you, you have a significant advantage. But if you're just getting into the space right now and trying to say, okay, I'm going to purchase something and I'm going to utilize that to make a living or to gain some financial advantage, you need to understand that the industry is structured in a manner to where you don't have, you're at a massive disadvantage at this point, right? And the thing is like the competition's too high. The current arena surrounding especially ASIC miners outside of Script and SHA-256, which even those, it depends, but outside of those is not really dissimilar from insiders on a token based release, right? So it moves a lot slower, but it is still effectively the same thing. And it's something that's been bugging me a lot. I stay up late at night thinking about these things and what is the right thing to do ethically surrounding this. And I think that talking about it is going to be the best thing. And where I really struggle, I think personally with this is I think that, how do I put this? I don't necessarily think like every ASIC manufacturer and every influencer is evil or is malicious, but because of the nature of the incentive structure surrounding it, it's inevitable, right? Now, do I think there are some people that are doing it intentionally? Sure. I think that's definitely something that people are going to see that possibility and say, hey, I can make money. And obviously money, there's a reason why there's the saying, money is the root of all evil, because it does put ethical and moral blinders on individuals. You know, I think a great example is the Pi network, where it's quite obviously a pyramid scheme. It's multi-level marketing. Your phones aren't actually doing any solid proof of work when you're participating on that network, but because the incentive is there, people put on the blinders and they move into it and they act like there's no problem with it, when there is a clear problem with it, right? And frankly, it's like, it's getting to the point to where I don't even know if I'm comfortable working in this space, because the thing is like, if I want to be successful as a content creator, my job would be, right, or as an influencer, my job would be pretend everything's fine, call Gold Shell, call Ice River, take their units, show you guys how much money it makes in the first week, tell you to use my promo code, sell you something that I'm not even positive is going to be a good financial incentive. And then when you lose money, be like, well, I said it was not financial advice. Right? What you're seeing from me right now on Twitter, right here, right now, is effectively like just a crisis of ethics, right? I don't, and the hard part is like, people want me to call out individuals. I'm not going to do that. Do I think there are people, you know, that are doing things they shouldn't be doing? Yes. Do I think that they are necessarily fully aware and malicious? No, I don't. And I'm not, everybody has their own lines that they won't cross, their own, you know, they all have their own morals and ethics. I don't have to agree with them, and I can talk to you guys about them, and that's fine, but I also don't have to, like, I don't have to necessarily be like, I think I do get frustrated to the point to where I have called people out. I don't know how I feel about that. That's a whole other issue as far as like, you know, I think it's difficult. I mean, like, it's like I've clearly had, like, you guys have probably seen on Twitter, I've had conversations with people where they're like, well, you don't work well with people and all that sort of thing. And I get that perspective, and people are just trying to run their businesses and be profitable and do what they can. I just don't know that I can do this anymore in this manner. Like, I'm fine with testing GPUs, getting hash rates, talking about news, doing that sort of stuff, but I do not think I am comfortable in the least at promoting any of these shitcoin ASICs at all. I don't know that I'm even comfortable saying that those projects are viable or good, because I think that they're having a negative impact on the crypto industry as a whole. Now, Be More Stupid says if crypto starts pumping, you'll forget all about it. I don't think so, because crypto pumped before and I didn't forget about ASICs being a problem. So you could say that. I do get blinded, and when it does pump, I think we all do. And I think that it's fair to say that from a certain perspective, and I have made those mistakes in the past. But I am coming to the realization that we are getting to the point to where I don't think a lot of the layer 1 proof of work ASIC only cryptocurrencies are going to pump to a point to where they create financial prosperity for everybody that purchases one, right? I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.